Mic, camera, action.
He's going to the hole. We just gotta get there, override him before he jumps.
Just give me the go-ahead. He'll never make it to the hole.
Check fire. You stick to procedure, Bunch. You were recruited to apprehend him, not be his assassin. You understand that? Bunch, I can't hear you. Do you understand that?
Loud and clear.
Welcome back to Filmography, the show dedicated to watching every credited film from an actor's complete back catalogue from past debut through to present day in chronological order. Each episode, I'm joined by an esteemed guest to watch and discuss the next entry from the Focus Filmography and consider how it ranks amidst their career and whether we can trace any typecasting trends or topic traits or theatrical tics. For episode 5, I'm joined by the one and only Blake Byles to discuss the 5th appearance of the Stath alongside multiple Jet Lis in the none more so 90s The One. We watch, you listen, and hopefully watch along too. So Blake, thank you very much for coming on the show to discuss this film, which is Nobody's Bitch.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Jack. I really happy to be here, and when you threw this out there, I jumped onto it because I thought it might be a popular one. So thanks for having me in this spot.
I have to say, it was surprisingly popular. So I've seen this just once before at some point in my Statham fandom, watching as many of his films as I can. But there was a surprising amount of people that wanted to come on and discuss this, actually.
Yeah, well, I guess the kung fu element is quite popular, isn't it? And I guess you say about the Stath kind of filmography. Was the Stath big on your radar at that point? Or were you kind of watching it for Jet Li mostly?
No, by this point, I'm already well into this. I would be more watching this for the Stath than I would be Jet Li, I would have thought.
Okay, cool.
I came to Jet Li quite late. I don't know if I'd seen any of his Hong Kong movies before I saw him in any Western stuff.
Yeah.
Bruce Lee I had, Jackie Chan I had, but Jet Li I think is somebody I discovered through probably Lethal Weapon 4, to be honest.
Yeah, I'm trying to think back now. I feel like maybe I first saw Jet Li in Lethal Weapon 4. And then around the same time, I must have seen him in Once Upon a Time in China and America. So like lots of that kind of wire work and, the kind of Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon-esque and unreal stuff, but still really good martial arts. And so then this came soon after, I think. So I was just looking back on the filmography, and I don't think I've seen anything from either of these guys since like the mid-noughts. So
oh, really?
It was very much that kind of early noughts, like late 90s, early noughts time for the both of them for me.
And then, so you haven't seen any like Expendables, anything like from that era of say?
Yeah, I thought that might blow your mind because I know I'm skipping ahead a bit, but I know that you do ask how many of the Stath's filmography you've seen. So every time I listen to your episodes, I think, hang on, how many have I seen? And so I go through, and I think I've probably seen 6 max.
Okay, all right.
But I've never seen any of the Expendables or anything.
Like Fast and the Furious. So the big ones you're not there with, yeah.
So that's maybe I'm a rarity in your panel, but I thought that might be interesting as well.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, Mike and I often talk about this sense. One of the first things we ever spoke about, genuine chit chat, Mike, was this sense of like, what does it take to be a film fan? And I know from listening to you and other people's shows as well, you're not about the gatekeeping in the same way that I'm not. I mean, a film fan is somebody who likes watching films. Exactly. It's simply it, right? So, yeah, if you're a Stath fan because you like The One and you've liked him, what else you've seen, then you're a Stath fan, aren't you?
Well, and it's also listening to people talk about this stuff. It's great to get through that lens. So yeah, that gatekeeping element is so limiting because you can just get so much joy out of other people's perspectives. So yeah, I think it's a great project that you're doing.
I appreciate it. Yeah, I'm thoroughly enjoying it so far. And, we've got some really interesting films coming up where he tries to go outside of his comfort zone, and we'll see how that goes. And then he suddenly blows up and becomes this massive Hollywood action star. And, alongside Dwayne Johnson, who we're definitely going to discuss for this episode.
Yeah.
He's got to be one of the most bankable stars on the planet now in terms of action movies.
Yeah, well, I think a few of you and some of your guests have talked about this already. Like that kind of he found his stride, didn't he? He's kind of got this formula, but we're still in the realms of him testing out the waters in different places, which is quite cool. It's I'm hoping I might be able to jump in later in the journey and we'll see how far he's gone from this point. But you talk about him trying some things, and he definitely tried some things in this movie.
Oh, yes.
Some things work, some things not so much.
I think there's, Max and I in Ghost of Mars touched upon his attempts at accents, and I think we'd definitely have to break that down a little bit.
For sure.
So what do you think the 6 are that you've seen then? Obviously the one.
Yeah, so I've seen Lock, Stock, I've seen Snatch, I've seen The One, The First Transporter, and Crank, and The Italian Job. Those are the 6. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So to be fair, as you said, like up until that period in his career, really interesting that you've seen him up to like he's discovered who he has, and the audience have found him. And then you've walked away from the Stath. The poor Stath, you've walked away from him.
Oh well, yeah. I mean, by that point, he is the one. He's got his ultimate Jason Statham. He has ascended to the Stath as you were. But I don't know. Maybe I'll come back. Well, I'm going to be, because I'm going to be. I'm penciled in for a few more, so I'm looking forward to seeing how it develops. Maybe I've been a bit like prejudiced. Like when someone gets so big. Yeah, maybe it's my my snobbish sensitivities, my hipster kind of like, I liked them before they were cool,
I like that. Just like Dan Balls as well. He's very much the same. Like, people keep telling me to watch this film. Well, I'm not going to them, because why would I? Because I'm not going to be told what to do.
Yeah.
You did make an interesting point in that at the moment we're still watching that growth, and we're going to see him become the Stath.
Yeah.
And arguably, have you missed anything? Because he does kind of then just, again, like Dwayne Johnson, like a lot of these action stars, we're harkening back to some of the 80s ones, actually even further back, arguably 70s ones, maybe even 60s ones. Steve McQueen, these guys were not character actors. They were Hollywood stars. They were kind of idols who pretty much played the same role in every film. And that's true of the States. So yeah, I think you do make an interesting point there.
Yeah, it's kind of like people could say that it's a dilution of films or acting, but actually that's kind of what it was. Like as you're saying, it's that kind of Tom Cruise is one of those relics of that industry, isn't it? That kind of marquee studio actor where you kind of play facsimiles of that's the kind of capitalist model, right? What you're going to get. That people bank on that. If you're a bankable star, people know what they're going to get. So and that's fair enough,
No, you're right. And Cruise is the last one, isn't he? He's the last kind of Hollywood matinee idol, really, that's still doing that. Everyone else that's come since, even if they started that way, your Brad Pitts, your DiCaprios, perhaps, have worked hard to break out of that mold, I think, and show themselves to have that range. Yeah.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I mean, you look at those two that you just gave, you could look at, say, Troy, Achilles, and then like 12 Monkeys, the difference there. And the same with DiCaprio, he's had like a wide range. And that's interesting as well, because those guys had that kind of pin-up kind of stigma that they had to elevate, past. You make hay while the sun shines. You go down that route, but then you kind of want to show that you're made of more.
Yeah, definitely. Whereas some people, they find their lane and they stick to it. And that's where we're at with the Stath, right?
Mate, if you do it well, and he does do it well, got to hand him that.
So The One, then, why did you pick it? What is it in your memory that you remembered about it so much? Why did you want to discuss it, and sort of, why did you want to rewatch it and get into it?
Yeah, well, I forgot that he was in it. So when you put this project up, and I was going to go through the list, the one just jumped out because it's so kind of, for me, it's so stereotypical of that time. I was about 18 or something when it came out, and like young dude, and it's got I was big into the Matrix, and there's lots of kind of Matrix influence here, I think. There's the kind of new metal, heavy metal kind of soundtrack, and it was just I just wanted to kind of go back for a bit of nostalgia, but from this new context of, oh, let's watch this guy. And I was curious to see how it holds up, actually, because I quite fancied it, although I mustn't have fancied it that much because I don't think I've watched it since then. So, those ones, it's like, it's the same with Chris and Dave on the VHS Strikes Back. They kind of have these things that they hold up, but then they're like, oh, hang on, I haven't actually watched it in about 20 years. And sometimes it's a nice surprise, and sometimes it's an anguish torching of a favorite.
It's always a risk, isn't it, to delve back in after such a long time. I reckon I'm the same as you. I don't think I've seen it since release, or I wouldn't have seen it in the cinema. I wouldn't have seen it then, I don't think. Yeah, since I first caught it on DVD. And that idea of The Matrix, a massive influence, definitely. There's no shadow of a doubt. But there's another film from around this time called Equilibrium with Christian Bale.
Yes.
And I put that in this similar sort of world, but heavily influenced by that, but trying to put a little tweak on it. And again, a film I don't think I've seen since whenever it was out, 2001, 2002.
Yeah. I probably haven't seen it since then as well. Maybe I revisited it a few years after that, but it's still been a long, long time. I actually have that penciled in for Chris and Dave's Comics in Motion, the TVs and movies, because they wanted to get me on there. And I was just thinking, does it count if the comic has been made after the movie? And Dave's like, yeah, sure. And so I think we're going to go Equilibrium.
Oh, nice. That's a good excuse for me to rewatch that too.
Yeah.
I love it. So The Matrix is a massive influence. New metal, as you said, is all over this soundtrack. It is, I think I said in my intro, so naughty as it hurts, basically.
Yeah.
What else do you reckon you picked out as this cribbing from? I know it's a little bit reductive sometimes to do that. Think about I can see this film and that in it. But I think here, it all comes together into quite an interesting melange. But what else do you reckon you saw in here from other franchises, other movies?
Yeah, so stylistically, The Matrix had that green tinge over it, that kind of digital noir type vibes, and this is very blue. This is a very blue film. It's obviously, you can draw to the Highlander franchise.
They weren't even subtle in that, were they?
No.
I don't know. I wrote that line of dialogue down. I don't know if you can remember it.
I think they said it. They said the phrase, didn't they?
They said there will be only one. Come on.
Yeah.
One word change.
They went to the lawyers for that one.
Yeah.
And Time Cop, I think.
Good shout.
What about you?
I reckon I also picked out Demolition Man.
Yeah,
a little bit of that in there. Maybe a bit of the Terminator, that sense of absolutely will not stop until you're dead.
Yeah, exactly.
And I thought in the opening introduction, which obviously leads us nicely into the start of the movie, I thought there was heavy X-Men vibes, that voiceover with their graphics coming up on the screen.
Oh, yeah,
and it's
sure.
In X-Men, you're seeing the kind of the DNA, aren't you? But here you're seeing almost I don't know what it's supposed to be, the multi-dimensional
wormhole or something like that. Yeah.
So it's definitely one of those ones where it's been oh, I like that, and I'll put that here. But I do think this has enough of an identity to stand on its own.
Right. You think, yeah. So that's something to explore. Because, taking from all these movies, it's like a buffet, but is it a whole meal?
Yeah, absolutely. I was pleasantly surprised, I think, when I finished it. I was like, actually, it's short and sweet. It's only sort of 19 minutes, isn't it?
Yeah.
I didn't get bored.
I looked at the runtime. It says 87 minutes, and going into it, I was thinking that. So as soon as the credits popped up, I looked at it, and it comes in at an hour and a quarter or something without the credits. So it's short, sharp, and sweet. Kind of putting it out there. I feel like it's a great concept, and how far can you go with it? And I almost feel like it's the type of movie that could have had sequels.
Mm.
But it just needed a bit of creativity on how to implement that. How would you do it? And we could talk about it now or later if you're working through the storyline.
No, I mean it whips through, doesn't it? As you said, I didn't even realize it was that short without the credits. An hour and 15. That's amazing. Just can't imagine that now. Can you add on that again? And that would be the one you'd get in 2022.
Yeah.
I thought the same actually. It finished and I thought, oh, I could watch more of these. I think, yeah, you'd have to do some. I'm not sure what the phrase is. I think, yeah, if it came back and did the same thing, then no. But there was scope to open it up, almost like a. I don't mean this in the way this is going to sound disparaging. I don't mean this. Almost like a pilot for a TV series.
Yeah. Well, it's like Quantum Leap or something like that, you know.
Absolutely, yeah. So what were you thinking?
Into those different worlds.
How would you? I mean, obviously in 2022 as well. I mean, we can't escape the multiverse, can we?
Exactly. Yeah.
I'm also rewatching Fringe with Tony for our season's greeting show, and that's another.
Yeah.
Spoilers, just in case anybody. It's too late now. Anybody hasn't ever watched Fringe, but that deals with like multiversal dimensions as well. You find that out by end of season 1. It's fine. So what would you do? What was your thoughts about how you could?
Well, yeah, just skipping into the story a bit, but I think that one of the standouts in this was Delroy Lindo. I think he was probably one of the better actors in it. And this was just a side bit of trivia. I didn't realize, but he was born in Lewisham, where I live. A borough of London, and but I think he moved over to the States as a teen. But bringing up accents again, I never would have picked that he was a Southeast London boy, and because I've always ever heard him with an American accent, and he does a much more convincing accent than some people.
Oh, I wonder who.
So I liked. So for the story, Delroy Lindo plays one of Jet Li's characters, like the bad Jet Li, Law, I think his name is.
Mm-hmm.
He plays Law's ex-partner in this. What are they, kind of cops of the multiverse or something? I don't know. And Law's gone bad, and so it's up to Delroy Lindo to chase him. So I really like that dynamic, and because there was conviction in it, and so I would like to see perhaps a prequel where that shows them as partners and how it all kind of comes about, because we're coming in at the end of Law's kind of reign of terror, aren't we?
Yeah, I mean, there's only Law. Well, except the film opens, doesn't it, with Law assassinating another version of himself, which means there's now only two left. There's Law and Gabe Law from these two different universes, which all have really interesting mad names, anywhere from Anubis. No explanation why that's called the Anubis universe, to, it's called like B-52 universe or something. It's just they pick these things around, they're thrown at a dartboard. Yeah, that would do.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, I like that idea. That's interesting. And I think I agree with you. Delroy Lindo always brings gravitas to everything he does.
It would add a bit more of that kind of cop procedural stuff, which I thought he did quite well. But then it almost becomes like a Shakespearean thing of like, the Obi-Wan and Anakin, the brothers, and backstabbing or loyalties and that type of thing. They could have explored that.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I think this film does a good job of that, of not having to over-explain backstory, provide loads of exposition. We get one scene where Delroy Lindo's character, Rodecker, I think, isn't it, is talking to Statham's character, Funch, I think his name is. I was really... Like
Funch.
I know, I was listening all the way through, like, what is it again? What is it?
Yeah. Sometimes it sounds like they're saying fudge.
It does, yeah. And they have like a very brief conversation just as they're about to split off to hunt down. Finch is going to look for Gabe Law to try and convince him to team up with them, whilst Radek is going to look for Law to try and stop him. He's got this weird bomb, which I don't really understand either.
Yeah, that was odd, yeah.
And they again, there's a hint at like a backstory for Statham's character. He's like, I know you had this happen to you, but you've got to remember not everyone's bad and not everything's going to turn out wrong. And again, there's this little throwaway lines of dialogue, which lets you know perhaps they were hoping for a franchise, or it's quite refreshing to watch a film where they don't have to over explain everything. We don't have to see well, we don't have to see Bruce and Martha get killed again.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, maybe they were setting it up for something else, or maybe it was just like just trying to keep to the action, because that's the thing. It's like, I was coming back to it, I was actually surprised at how little Jet Li actually performs, and brings out the fight scenes. So for them to push more on these other backstories, it's kind of like, know what you've got and use it.
Definitely. And I think that's where these heavy time cop vibes came in for me, because this is the thing that time cop does well as well, doesn't it, in terms of playing with there it's different eras of characters. Here it's different versions of characters, and who may go bad and who can abuse this technology. Definitely. I'm liking it more. Actually, I feel like now we're talking about it, I actually like the film even more than I already thought I did. I mean, the concept does work. It's cool. I mean, I think there are definite flaws in the execution. I think in the hands of a more experienced, maybe, James Wong has done some interesting stuff.
Yeah. I think it might have been his second film.
Right, because he'd been heavy X-Files, hadn't he?
Yeah, and I think he did Final Destination before this. Then another Final Destination, the Dragon Ball Z one. And,
we both make okay. Let's not do it. But maybe in the hands of a more experienced director within this realm. I mean, imagine the Wachowskis getting their hands on this. This could have been amazing, couldn't it?
Yeah, that could have been interesting, actually.
But it's definitely like, if there's, we often talk about these remakes and reboots and recalls, as we get them called now, and all these different terms for it, and which ones are worthy of it or not. And often the ones which seem to work better are the films that were average to okay when they first came out. Like, you wouldn't remake The Godfather, why bother? You wouldn't remake Back to the Future, why bother? But the one, it's good enough, but there's mileage to do something with it that could really improve it. This might be one that's due a rethink.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, that's one of the things, like whenever they do these like reboots and stuff, and it goes to that they're less likely to cast older characters, not older actors now, aren't they? That's always like, you got to be all young and sexy and whatever. But because of my kind of prequel kind of theory with them being the cops again, it kind of there is a good reason to go young, because you kind of want to go back in the story.
And then we could still then get the Stath. If we can go backwards, we can go forwards. We can get the Stath, and he can be the grizzled, experienced detective. Now he'd be in the Rodecker role.
That's a good one, actually, because I'm going to put it out there. I thought his character was quite two-dimensional in this one. It's just, and like his accent didn't really help. Like, he was trying that kind of transatlantic kind of, but he's just kind of mumbling his way through it, like rah 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 procedure, rah 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 procedure, and just his sole motivation is how it's kind of like those tropes of like the bad boy, and it's just like he's too cool for like these rules and all that. He's like second-rate Fonz or something. And every second sentence he's talking about sarcastically about the procedure, and so it would be nice. Yeah, if he were to come back and he's the wary, it's that kind of Lethal Weapon vibe, isn't it? The young upstart versus the kind of seasoned, kind of tired cop, and how do you pass that torch?
Oh, definitely. And it's not, I doubt this. I mean, I think he probably looks back on this as being important in terms of his career and where it was going. There's a chance to work with Jet Li and to ostensibly get a co-lead role, really. I mean, it's Jet Li, and I know that because he becomes kind of the next most important character once Rodecker's killed off. We do go into spoilers in the show, as you know, and anyone that's listening that hasn't listened before, sorry, spoiler alert for 10 seconds ago, much like Fringe. But I agree with you. I think, actually, I'm going to put this to you. I made a note on it. Would anything different happen in the film if his character wasn't in it?
That thought did cross my mind, because it's all Rodecker's running the show, like in regards to their operations, and he's kind of mumbling and grumbling. But he's like the sulky teen following Rodecker. Rodecker kind of does. I don't like the way he goes. I just thought all of what they had going on. He had a decent fight with him, like a choreographed fight and everything like that. But I didn't like the way he went. But yeah, the Stath's character is just kind of following Gabe, the good guy, around, just mumbling away, trying to explain stuff to him. Gets beaten up and then watches it all. And I mean, you know what he does? He turns it around at the end, doesn't he? If it wasn't for when they all, we're jumping over the place a bit here, a bit like the multiverse, but when they kind of warp through at the end, he's the one who turns the tables, doesn't he? So
that's true, actually. So for 112 minutes of this film, he affects nothing. But in the last 2 minutes, I mean, as you said, we're over the place, but that's fine. I mean, we're not going to talk linearly through the story. At the end, of course, Yulor is defeated. But what they can't do is kill him because they don't know what will happen if there is only one multiversal version of a character left, which is what they're trying to stop in the first place.
Yeah,
so they capture him, don't they? And they send him to the Hades version, which is like the prison verse. And then Gabriel goes off to his own little universe, but only, as you said, because Statham's Funch sends him there. They actually wanted to send him back to his own original universe, didn't they? But sadly, in his universe, Carla Gugino, his wife, has been murdered by Yulor.
Yeah, so he's lost any will to live from that point. Yeah.
So he sends him to a new universe where he can fall in love with her and restart his relationship.
Did that universe give you Back to the Future vibes?
Oh, okay, that's interesting. I thought Bill and Ted.
Yeah.
Like San Dimas and like the bright colours. Yeah, I mean, I guess we're looking at 5-year period. What was it? 85, 4-year, 85 to 89. I think is about right. If my memory serves correct. So yeah, definitely, I got that feel too. It's very like vibrant and colourful and modern, but with a harkening back vibe, wasn't it? Absolutely.
Yeah. This kind of utopia of the future where it's like the cleanness and whiteness of the future of the suburbs brought into like the city element. Yeah, I thought it was quite funny.
Yeah, absolutely.
One thing. So yeah, the bad Jet Li, Yulor, he's one of the things I found weird in that opening scene was, which we've got to give a shout out to Dean Norris from Breaking Bad. Did you spot him in there? That was really interesting.
One of the cops that's behind the mask and everything. Yeah.
He's kind of talking about the formula and the same roles. He very much suits that role. So he's transporting Lawless, isn't he? The third Jet Li that we see, and bad Jet Yulor ambushes them. And that's where we see the very first slow-mo fight scene. And what did you think about those slow-mo scenes?
They were okay, I thought. What about yourself? I mean, the trouble is everything at this time was doing it, weren't they? They were slow-moing and they were bullet timing. I guess when you've got somebody like Jet Li, you'd rather see what he can do at normal speed.
Yeah.
It's kind of what I was thinking.
Yeah, that's interesting because I was torn because I recently for the VHS Strikes Back, we watched Police Story from Jackie Chan, and it was the first time I'd seen it, but I was just blown away. And I have seen a few other of his like Hong Kong films. But one of the things that really blows me away about that stuff is you can see the action so much better. And I want to give a plug to a YouTube channel I really like called Every Frame a Painting. And look that up. And they do a great bit on how to do action comedy, and they use Jackie Chan as an example, and they kind of contrast between in Hong Kong cinema, you just like the camera is often really static, and it's like I was saying a bit before, it's like your talent, use it. Whereas they contrast with Hollywood, they always want to cut on the action, and so it's like someone throws a punch and then they cut to another shot of the punch landing. And what that really does, like in one, it kind of helps people who aren't really trained martial artists. They've had a bit of training, but what it also does is you lose a lot of the kind of balletic motion and
Mhm.
virtuosity of like these people. And while I thought that a lot of the slow-mo stuff was a bit like gimmicky, like you say, from around that time, it was just nice to kind of see an uninterrupted bit of movement from Jet Li, because he is just so fluid.
That's a really good argument. You're right. That first scene stands out, and the next scene that stands out is just after Bodek has been killed by Yulor, and you get the 3 cops that turn up to arrest him. You get the cop car, don't you? And the
Yeah.
2 motorbike cops. What did you think of that scene in terms of its choreography, CGI?
Yeah, I remember that being quite cool when I watched it, but now it's like that was a bit ropey looking with the CGI. Like the lighting was off and everything, like his body as opposed to the lighting of the bikes. It's a cool idea, and that kind of makes me think back to you drew on the Terminator. That made me think because of the bikes. Yeah, that one didn't work as well as
No.
as I hoped.
I always try and be forgiving in terms of CGI, particularly in terms of like effects, because we just know they're doing what they can for the era. We know it's always going to move on. And you go back and look at 80s stuff, and you go back and you look at earlier stuff, and you look at stop motion, like
Yeah,
you can still enjoy it. Like Cast Deadly Spell that Dan covered on his podcast last week had some stop motion stuff in it, some puppet stuff. And of course, by today's standards, it looks ridiculous. But within the film, it works and it's fine and it's fun. So I try to be forgiving. I know sometimes we can't help ourselves, can we? And this is really quite cartoony.
Yeah, and I can appreciate that in a way, because you really want to yeah, okay, so you really want to kind of raise the stakes and show kind of what, like the Terminator, what an unstoppable force this is. But then at the same time, it also kind of highlighted to me some kind of logical inconsistencies. So to go back to that first scene, the first slow-mo with the Dean Norris Breaking Bad guy. So Yulor has jumped into this universe. He's hidden an event to ambush this guy, and I was actually surprised again how much Jet Li uses guns in this, because that's very like I don't know. I wouldn't pair him with that. I want to see him fight. But anyway, so he assassinates Lawless, the third Jet Li, just with a gun. So he's gone straight away. That was quite cool, because that's that kind of thing of, oh, here's Jet Li. Lawless is the first Jet Li we see, and then he's dead. It kind of gives you that shock of what's that Tom Cruise movie, The Edge of Tomorrow, where he like always dies, and like Tom Cruise never dies. So that's that kind of nice thing. But so after he's done all this big elaborate ambush, and then he just completely smokes out all the cops, he just sprints out the door and then just like runs away on foot. And it's like, if you are a superhuman, like near God level person with your running, jumping, all this, why would you just run in the middle of the road when you got like cars chasing it? Like, it's just the conceit of it is like just so that it could involve cars and car crashes and things like that. And it's funny because then the Gabe, the good Jet Li, he does the same thing later on. He's like just running down the middle of the road, and the Stath just kind of sidles up to him in the car just to chat to him. It just doesn't make any sense to me.
The powers are really inconsistent. At times, as you said, like they do like the running really fast, which the MCU does in Civil War when they have to chase between Winter Soldier and Cap coming after him on a bike, and Black Panther. I think they do that really well in that scene. Yeah, but then he can jump over a wall. But then at other times, he doesn't seem as strong. And Gabriel says, because it's the two of us, we both have equal amount of power. But Gabe doesn't seem to. Yeah, that's the sort of thing that where it was like, if you remade this, all of that could be resolved and be thought out a bit better.
Yeah. In that regard, I kind of did think about it of like the Jedi Sith kind of balance of, they both have the same power, but one person's using it in a different way, And so how do you, it's that kind of duality thing, like how do you balance that? Yeah, but yeah, I just scoffed at that, because it's like, mate, if you can run really fast, you can jump really high, jump over these buildings, and then these cops in the jeeps are just stuck. They're not going to chase you. So
that's a really nice analogy, though, the Jedi Sith bump, because doing that the bit of research before we're talking about tonight, and reading about the fighting styles that Jet Li uses, he does deliberately use different types of kung fu styles, doesn't he, as the two different Gabe and Yulor. Now I'm going to butcher these names. I'll do my best. So I read Gabe utilizes Bazquahang. I'm sorry, everybody who is totally offended by my attempts. And Yulaw uses Jingquan. And essentially it's what you've just said. Like Gabe's is about like reflecting his like mindset and being open. And he says at one point about like it's like he almost has like circle of life comment, doesn't he? Like my grandfather told me about that.
His movements are very circular, aren't they? Open palmed, circular. Whereas Eulaw's is very bam, bam, linear, straight
Absolutely.
to the point.
So it's interesting that you made that comparison because clearly they were going for something along these lines. That one is about, you know, Cobra Kai and Miyagi-Do. One's attack and one's defense.
Yeah.
And I thought they showed that really nicely earlier on in the movie. About halfway through, maybe they both do like a kata type like practice once they first met each other and they've escaped and they're both. And you see Gabe doing almost like a the name's escaping me now. Like
a Tai Chi type of.
That's it.
Movement.
Yeah.
Meditative and contemplative and stuff. Yeah. Another one that stood out to me early on in the film was so Yulaw gets captured, doesn't he? And so he's put in the seat, you know, which is kind of like the electric chair, but they're gonna transport him to that prison universe that you talked about, Hades. And then this is actually when we get our first female character appears. I don't know how many minutes in, but it's it's that universe's version of TK. And I was watching it with my wife and she scoffed because it's like the first woman you see and it starts at the heels and like slowly moves up her legs to her like sexy form-fitting dress to her like, you know, beautiful pouting face. And so she's kind of going in there and you know something's afoot, you know, and she sits down to witness the warp, you know, him getting sent away, and it goes back to her shoes, and on the heel, very suspicious looking heel, a little door opens and a little rat comes out. Well, I say a little rat, but it had like the hugest balls you've ever seen on a rodent, and it has an antenna sticking out of its butt. And so you're like, okay, here we go, something's going to happen. And because we've mentioned the new metal before, right? I think this is maybe the third time you get the needle drop, and it just goes. You see the rat scuttle along, and the security guard's just starting to notice it, and you just get this, and the rat blows up, and it just causes chaos, and that's how he manages to escape. But yeah, that was very reminiscent of those times, you know, that music, and a perfect way, I think. I don't think you could use that type of music in lots of films, but for this film, it really worked.
Oh, it massively works, and that's the scene most people seem to talk about in terms of like their memory of this movie is the as you said that perfectly, like the needle drop and the explosion. I mean, what a crazy concept! Like a mouse or a rat, you know, where is it in a hill? I mean, I'm slightly concerned about how they put that antenna on that mouse. Like, where did they put it? Is that super glue? Is that actually up? But I'm not sure. But as a concept, it's crazy, and yeah, I mean, there's so many things about Carla Gugino's character we've got to think about here. Like, I agree, like the objectification is ridiculous here. I mean, Carla Gugino is a beautiful woman, don't get me wrong. Sure. But the leeriness of the camera again is so very like Michael Bay, early 2000s. Somebody's been, you know, James Wong's been watching his movies recently, clearly. And so obviously like signposts, femme fatale. Yeah. But even her name, like TK, another one like Funch and TK. Like every time people say the names, I was like, what? Why are you calling her TK? It's weird, and they never explain it. It's not like we know it's Tina King or like. Yeah. It's
just a couple of letters that just like they rolled a die or something.
Yeah, it's just another weird little moment that I guess somewhere in the writer's room they've got an explanation. Maybe there is a 2.5 hour cut of this movie out there where they've trimmed loads of stuff down because they wanted that fast pace. But
yeah. Well, it's funny you say that because her character does seem quite reductive in a way. Like her main thing is just this kind of maternal, like I need to look after my husband, and yeah, fair enough, of course, but there's like so much more to it. But so after they have this whole hospital scene, and Gabe's partners or like his mates on the force, they take her back to their house to make sure everything's okay. And she has this one, because she's trying to assist Gabe without his buddies knowing, and so she's trying to get away from one of his partners who won't leave her, and she just says, "Oh, sorry, I just got to go do girl stuff." Like in the toilet, as if he's just going to be like, ugh, don't talk to me about that. Just go. Ugh, no.
That I have to say, like, that's a good example of, like, there's some attempts at comedy in this that just don't work for me. There's that moment, and this guy, which is Gabe Law's like friend and partner, is definitely in love with Gabe's wife. Like, watch your back when he's turned, mate. But there's also a couple of minutes, all in the hospital, actually, weirdly, where they try to really like bring in some comedy elements here. You have like the morgue attendant who faints. You have the MRI like technician who is like being really snarky, like unnecessarily so. The Pepsi can like flipping open. And I thought the worst one, as you were just saying, like with the police were watching on a monitor what was going on with TK as well. Just, it was a really weird shot where they were all like hunched over a computer screen. There's like gunshots and explosions, and like none of these police are moving. They're just watching TV, watching their mate in a gunfight. It was a very weird moment. I thought the comedy didn't land at all. What about yourself?
I was glad that they got out of that hospital. It just like you say, it just felt clunky and unrealistic. Maybe because it was a real hospital. I think I read that it's actually in Hollywood, and that's where they film Scrubs, and like a medical center or something. And so maybe there's just this thing about being on location and just the stress of that. It just things didn't quite work out as well as they hoped. Especially because for a movie that's got such a short runtime, they seem to just chew up a lot of time there. It was interesting. There was one interesting element was when the two Jet Lis kind of meet again and they have a bit of a tussle, and then they kind of go their separate ways. But then there's a bit of a case of mistaken identity, because obviously no one else knows about Yulaw yet. So they see Yulaw doing some bad stuff on the CCTV, and then they assume it's Gabe, and then they have this kind of confrontation. One of the best things, again, it was Delroy Lindo. He and the Stath kind of holding back, and they're just watching through a mirror, like kind of surveying the scene, and Lindo is just like, no, he's okay in their hands. It's like just this old hand, he's been around, he's done this before, and he's like, he's safe over there. Let's carry on with the mission. I like that. That was probably my favorite part of the hospital, like in terms of like the story and believability.
Yeah, because it was a character beat which told you something about him, as you just said. It told you about his experience of what he's doing, rather than. It's a shame because I liked Yulaw was stalking towards Gabe, and then the MRI sucked his gun away out of his hand. There were some neat little touches, but I agree with you.
Yeah,
that was probably a 20-minute segment that was 10 minutes too long, unfortunately.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah,
because as soon as we move past that, we have a couple of these scenes we've spoken about. We have the police scene, and we have Yulaw trying to trick TK. He's hiding in the loft, pretending to be Gabe, isn't he? Until she figures it out, and that's when she gets killed, unfortunately. And then we're at the finale, really, aren't we? We suddenly race to the finale, where Gabe has tracked down Yulaw and the Status followed along, like Indian raiders. Do you know what I mean? Like everything's happening, and Indy's there, but he's not really affecting anything.
Yeah, exactly.
Just put it out there, Raiders is one of my favorite films of all time. But I mean, that is a proven fact now, isn't it? That Indy doesn't affect anything that happens in that movie until the very end. Maybe that was the inspiration for the one.
That's very interesting. Very interesting take.
But we get the Jet Li versus Jet Li fight in like this big factory, this big Terminator style factory, which I don't know about you, I thought was really, really well done. I thought the choreography was excellent. The editing was really strong here. And the stunt Jet Li, I know they did facial mapping.
Yeah.
But the stunt Jet Li, like the way his physicality was so well cast, he really matched what Jet Li was doing perfectly.
Oh yeah, but also the choreography is so dynamic. You're not really nitpicking at that point, are you? You're just soaking it up, because it is all culminated in this. Like that they're going to clash again. They've kind of butted heads a couple of times and kind of come away, and this is what it's all about. And Yeah, and I was thinking about this thing with the Stath, like his trajectory and that into, because soon after this he is doing like Transporter and things like that, isn't he? So I didn't have a close look. I didn't really like rewind it, but it looked like he did that jump from like one platform to another where he would have been on a wire. There's a kind of a cool choreographed fight. He gets beaten up and kind of there's a sweet flip over, which would have been a stunt double because it's like a backwards wire flip. But he's getting in there, like that's some quite, how awesome would that be? It's where how many, like 5 movies in, and he's like he's got a choreographed fight against like a major martial artist, like movie star. That's awesome.
That is awesome. And earlier as well, they had the Gabe and Stath character have the tussle in like the mall or something, don't they, as well? And he's hanging upside down from the balcony. You're right. He is suddenly getting stuck in. He's definitely his fighting is guns than it is physical here again, isn't it? He's still not quite managed to convince anybody that he can use his martial arts in a movie yet.
Yeah, no, that's true. And it casts me back to, I can't remember which one it was, which episode that you did. Maybe it was Snatch, where you're talking about how in those early days he was that kind of cheeky chappy geezer wheeler dealer kind of guy, wasn't he? And he did get like a clip around the ear and kind of knocked on the seat of his pants a few times. And I was thinking about it when I was listening to your episodes about his trajectory. When you move into those like marquee stars, those matinee idols like you're talking about, you don't really get knocked on your ass that much, do you? There will be times when you have a dip because you've got to come up, you've got to have somewhere to go. But because you've talked to other guests about is either Stath or at what point is it, and there's those kind of, especially in the British films, I think people want to root for that underdog geezer wheeler dealer, but those types of people still end up on their ass a lot because it's that kind of, I don't know if it's like a social kind of thing, but the heroes can still very much be down and out. And I think he still is that in this, because he does get, he's just trailing after Jet Li the whole time, getting like held over balconies or like knocked over balconies and landed on platforms. And because how long did it take him after that fight to get that gun? It's like, so okay, I've had a licking, I'm just going to go crawl over here while you guys do some awesome stuff.
I mean, to be fair, I'd be keeping out of it too. No, that's definitely true. And I don't know. I mean, I guess I'll look it up when we get there, because Hobson Shaw is, it's going to be right towards the end of this journey. But I know very famously when The Rock and Vin Diesel had their like sort of knockdown brawl, there was all these rules, weren't there, about like they have to have the same amount of punches, and if one gets knocked down, then the other one has to be knocked down, and it was this macho posturing. And then we know famously, whether it's, I don't think it's for publicity, but it doesn't seem to be. They fell out because Vin Diesel didn't like Dwayne taking his star status away. Everyone was focusing on Dwayne Johnson in the Fast and Furious movie. So no, I think that's really insightful. I think that's really true. And something I'd think that I tap into with the Stath, and you're right, it is a British thing, isn't it? This sense of an underdog, or this sense of like maintaining this sense of who you are despite a level of stardom. I don't follow a lot of celebrity culture. I don't really know anything about who's dating who and all this rubbish. But if there's somebody that I like, I guess I stay interested in whether they stay true to themselves. And I think, as much as you can tell, he seems to have done that. He's not interested in the celebrity life. Like his kids, don't think I've ever seen a picture of his kids. Like he keeps them out of the press. He does seem to have that sense of kind of rooted in reality and who he is, and just seems to be enjoying the heck out of what he's getting to do.
Yeah. I think it's a good way to do it, and maybe that's how you stay sustainable in the game.
Yeah. And he's up. Tony talks about this a lot. Ed Norton doesn't get cast in a lot of stuff because he's difficult to work with. He's a really talented actor, probably one of the best for his generation, but he's difficult. He has opinions. That doesn't necessarily make it difficult, but for all intents and purposes, what we've heard from a lot of people is he's quite difficult. People seem to really like Jason Statham. People want to cast him in his movies. People seem to have good opinions of him. And again, whatever you think of Tom Cruise, it's the same for him, isn't it? Everyone only ever has something nice to say about him.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he's setting up. He's like the boss in in pretty much everything he does anyway, right? So if you want to stay in the game, I suppose you've got to.
Yeah, fair point. All right, I've got a little game for you.
Let's go.
So, Jet Li and Jason Statham met on this movie.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know how many films they have made together?
Oh, I think I saw this before in my research. So is it 3 Expendables movies? And War.
He's got it.
Yeah.
All right.
I haven't seen War, and I haven't seen any of the Expendables movies, which is crazy because I grew up on all those guys. For some reason, I just haven't got there.
So, I mean, that's pretty impressive, isn't it? Like, these guys have worked together 5 times now. Soon to be 6, of course. They're both going to be in Expendables 4.
Yeah, right. Well, I mean, like, it goes back to what you're saying about the Stath. It's like, you're not going to get work if people don't like working with you. Also, because I was thinking about this, because I was just going through the IMDb and that, and Delroy Lindo was also in Romeo Must Die, which I around that time I really loved as well. Yeah, that makes me think of, because while I've been listening to your episodes and I've been going through, every time you ask how many of people watch and I go through his filmography, it strikes me, because you've talked about his ascension to the Stath, and then he has this kind of action star, movie star kind of quality. A lot of his films, I counted it actually, it's maybe about a third of his films are sequels or remakes, So it's like getting into that realm of the kind of the formula and finding his style and sticking with it, because it's, what is it, the Transporters, the Mechanic, Cranks, the Expendables, the Fast and Furious franchise, and then a few remakes, the Italian Job and another one. Yeah. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think it totally lines up with what you're saying. I can't put it any better than you have done. I think he's found his lane and he's happy sticking in it. And actually, so one jumped in my head and I lost my train of thought. Like Parker, I think, is also like another remake, isn't it? Which is him playing a very similar character to like the Mechanic and things like that. I think it's that he is now cast because he is the Stath, right? I mean, you don't get a nickname without creating a persona. But I don't know if I see it as a bad thing. I mean, way back in my first episode with Dan, way back, he says, like 2 months ago, in the annals of time when I discussed Lock Stock. When Stace talks about like the actors that inspired him, to me it just made total sense. It was Steve McQueen, it was Clint Eastwood, it was Stallone, and actually you can see that those little bits of DNA in him. I think.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, when you brought that up, I remember listening to that and thinking, yeah, I can see that. And again, it does him a service, I think, because some people could be snobby about like action stars and that, but when you look at the kind of constellation of his idols, I mean, they're all amazing, and it's just a type of cinema, isn't it? But I think you can try and hang off the coattails of legends, but he's there because of his own talent, and his charisma. He's a good-looking dude. He can be physical, and he's got charisma. Like your other guests have talked to, and yourself have talked about his charisma, and it's just his star power, isn't it? So yeah, good on him.
I mean, he's literally a guy who was, selling stuff on the streets. When he was discovered by Guy Ritchie, he starts to write roles for him, and then look at where he ends up. And it's not a long period of time, really. Was it 25 years? Which I suppose, it's a couple of decades. But I mean, what I mean is, he wasn't a child star. He was, I mean, like,
yeah.
It all seems to accelerate really, really quickly. And then, as we said a few times now, like he found his place and he's like, I'm comfortable here. He's kind of a mainstream B-movie star, isn't he?
Yeah. And your guests, you've commented on, like, he must have had great representation, great agent, great manager because of his ascension. But just like to look at the guy, like these kind of qualities we've put out there, I reckon if you got in the room with him you'd just be smitten, wouldn't you?
Mm.
I reckon as a casting director or whatever, you'd just be like, this guy, he's got it. You know, he might not have at that point, he might not have the CV, but he's got it. And let's jump on that.
I can imagine him like really turning on the charm, a bit cheeky chappy. Absolutely, yeah, definitely. So we've spoken about it quite a few times already this episode, but this was originally a Dwayne Johnson vehicle. I'm sure you saw that yourself in your research. The one was going to be The Rock, which would have been fascinating, right? Because they've gone on to have a career together where they've got good chemistry, actually, the Stath and The Rock.
Yeah.
What do you think that would have done for this movie? How do you think it would have played out if it had been the one with The Rock and the Stath?
I think for them it would have been good. I think for us it probably wouldn't have been as good. I think they probably would have been able to bounce off each other really nicely. I just, The Rock is a physical dude. Obviously, he comes from like a fighting thing, but it's not, doesn't have that element that I think Jet Li brought to it. But yeah, I'm trying to think to compare it to another film. Like, what do you think it could have been like? Because we've gone to things like Time Cop, for instance. So JCVD, it's like he's ballistic as well. So there's all these moves and it's graceful, and I think The Rock would have just brought more brawn to it, and I'm not sure if that would have been quite the same. But what do you think?
No, it's interesting, isn't it? They sort of feel like they occupy the same space, don't they? I say it would have been like a street brawling character, and then what does the Stath bring to it? Because he's not funny here. He can be funny, but he's not funny here. And would The Rock have tried to be funny here? I mean, again, so The Rock turned us down to do The Mummy Returns, I guess, to play, and then to go on and be the Scorpion King. He wasn't The Rock. Yeah, he was The Rock. He wasn't Dwayne Johnson yet. He went the other way.
That's right.
He went from a the to reclaiming his name.
That's interesting. Yeah.
So yeah, I agree with you. I think actually we got the better version of the film. I would still watch that version of the film, but I think we need, as you said, we need the fluidity. We need the action star status of Jet Li combined with the more straight man that the Stath is. At the moment, he is always the straight man, really, at this point in his career.
Yeah.
I mean, so you haven't seen Hobbs and Shaw, I assume?
No, I haven't. No.
So that is very much, and I think Scott was the first person I saw say this. So shout out to you, Scott, 20th Century Geek. He compared that film to Tango and Cash.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
And that sense of like, these guys are kind of the same, but they do a slight little twist that makes them slightly different. And then ultimately, they butt heads. They know that classic story. Hobbs and Shaw does exactly that, and almost kind of follows some plot beats too that are similar. So I think maybe in another 10 years, we would have got that film here, but they weren't ready for that, I don't think, at this point.
No, for sure. That Tango and Cash one's interesting because from what I've seen from the outside, I could buy into that.
Well, if you're joining me on this journey, then you've got a lot of I hope enjoyable Stath movies to watch, and you can see it for yourself as we go.
Yeah. Does he just stick with his own accent these days, or how does it work? Has he worked on it?
I think he's decided, or somebody's told him, or this good agent that he's got, or the next good agent he's got, has said, "Look, no bother, mate."
Yeah.
He does it a couple of times. He does it in The Transporter, doesn't he? He tries again.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, I think I described it as all over the map. I'm not sure where he's supposed to be from in America, but it's not one clear place, is it?
Somewhere where they eat gravel for breakfast.
Yeah, that's true.
Or marbles or something. You know what? I'm just thinking now, maybe one of the reasons I tuned out, I think maybe the last one I saw was The Transporter, because I was a big Hitman video gamer. I like that franchise. And maybe when I saw The Transporter, I thought, oh, here we go. This could be a bit of a proxy Hitman game. And when it wasn't, I was like, oh, okay, fair enough. But I think I liked it. I don't know, what are the sequels like? Spoilers?
The second one is one of my favorite Stath movies. Transporter 2 is unadulterated, overblown, cartoony comic book genius. I used to live with my sister, who is a fellow Comics in Motion podcaster, We used to be obsessed with that film. We used to watch it all the time. It's so good. The third one's fine. Yeah, I like the first Transporter, but the second one is it's another one of those things where it's like, okay, we know what worked in the first one, and actually we're gonna up those to the point they want to be, but add in a bit more.
Yeah.
And sometimes that can fall flat on its face, and you get all the wrong elements combined. In Transport 2, for me, it really, really works.
Nice. I look forward to hearing it.
I look forward to getting that. I love that film.
You know what? I just remembered just a little bit of trivia.
No, please.
I read this somewhere, and I don't know if it was like I haven't read this anywhere else except for just like someone's kind of user comments. So I don't know if it was premeditated or if this person's just reading into it. So you have these different names, and so you had Lawless at the start, and then you have Gabriel Law is the bad Jet Li, and then the good Jet Li is Gabe Law. So you have Gabriel Law, Gabe Law. If you made those names the same, what you have to take out of the bad Jet Li's name is Real You. Did you see that?
Nice. I didn't see that.
Interesting, eh?
Yeah.
Like, I wonder if that has to be intentional.
That has to be intentional.
For the train spotter. Yeah,
I mean, I never would have found it by myself.
No, neither.
But I'm glad that you pointed it out.
And just to, before we wrap up, one of the nostalgic things about the film was, when at the very start, they use it throughout, but the first time I laughed when they're chasing Law through the wormhole thing, and they bring out their little phone device things that tracks the jump time. Didn't it just look like an old like clamshell like Alcatel phone, like with a bit of like special effects on the top? Very like linked back to those early noughties.
I have to say, all the props. I'm going to call them future props. And actually, before we wrap up, let's talk about that. It's just jumped back into my head. All the props I thought from the kind of prime multiverse that Statham's comes from and that Law comes from looked really shonky. Like the guns, as you said, like they're almost like they've got like an alien style. Is that the thing you're talking about? Like the clamshell alien style, like tracker. Yeah. All of that I thought looked a little bit cheap, which is a shame when some of the other stuff, looked pretty decent. Maybe they just ran at their budget by then.
Well, it's kind of like that video game. Have you ever played No Man's Sky? Where it's like supposed to be like this procedurally generated universe, and they like advertise it as being all these kind of really cool different planets, with different wildlife and stuff. But when it first started, people would go to you kind of rocket across space to land on this planet, and then you just got like the dud planet with like sludge and like hardly anything there. And so maybe like their universe was just really shitty because like their gun looked like something out of like an old space porno or something, like a phallic kind of like a water pistol or something, like it's going to shoot bubbles.
Absolutely. So what do you think of like the multiversal technology? At times, I mean, you mentioned quantum leap earlier. It kind of felt like they were traveling through time as well. To me, anyway. I don't know if you thought that too.
It all seemed relatively contemporary, as in like 100 years or something.
Mm-hmm.
But like nothing ever seemed way out. The Hades place looked the worst, but even that still had a very much like a Judge Dredd kind of vibe to it. Like a wasteland and, kind of dystopian thing. My wife laughed at the, when they're going through the headshots of all the versions that Law has killed, and they've just got all these ridiculous wigs, and we thought like it must have been a fun time in the studio, like putting on all these dress ups just to play these different versions of himself. I would have liked to have seen like the multiverse side of it explored more or explained more in a way. Not like the lore of it, because we've been through plenty of stuff like that, but just to manipulate it. Just while we're talking about this version and this element, and it was the special effects, how some of it was quite shoddy. One part I liked was when they would go through the wormhole or like the warp, and like they would kind of fragment, and they were really tortured. It kind of looked ropey, but it was quite terrifying, and it made me think like, yeah, that's probably what it would be like. Your body is like coming apart, like atomizing or something, and going somewhere else. And it kind of made me laugh thinking about like Star Trek. I'm sure someone's probably like spoofed this, like Family Guy or something, where like with Star Trek, where they just really nicely get like a beamed up or whatever. And whereas this, they're all like in agony and writhing and just coming to pieces. What did you think about that element?
I mean, I think it's a shame. This is the one time, like, well, you know, the effects really affected it for me, because it really took away from it. Because again, same as you're saying, I love that concept. It was really interesting. That, yeah, because they were like shouting out and calling out when they were being teleported. And to think that Jet Li's character Yulia was willing to put himself through this like 100 and odd times in order to gain this power. I really like the concept, but the effects just really really took away from it for me, unfortunately. But absolutely, again, another thing that could really be interestingly be explored in a prequel, and a sequel, or a TV show, or if anybody wants to get you and me to do it, Blake, we're here, aren't we? We can
100%, yeah.
We've got a lot of ideas that we can take forward. But I'm sure, like, now you've mentioned Star Trek, I don't know how big a Trekkie, I don't know what the right term is nowadays you are, but I'm sure I heard or read somewhere that actually when they use the porting technology, it's killing them and creating a copy of them.
Wow.
You know, it's like like the replicator, which is where they get the food. I'm sure I heard somewhere that actually what it's doing is replicating them. So every time they do that, I may be completely wrong, and I may be about to get late. I mean, I'm sure Chris, the massive Star Trek fan, will be all over this and having a go at me later. But I'm sure I heard that somewhere.
Listeners, let us know.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. That's a really interesting concept. Yeah, I mean, like you said, there's so much that could be explored here. One thing, when I did start thinking about it like that, like you say, how Yulor goes through it so many times, I kind of rolled my eyes a little bit at that in the final scene, where it's that mistaken identity thing again, isn't it? They both look the same. Which one's the bad guy? and then one of them gets up and just like starts walking away and says, "Oh, it's that guy down there." Surely the dude who's done it like over 100 times will be the one who's going to be able to get up first. Because even the Stath is still like writhing around, and they just instantly believe him. It's like, oh, okay, fella who's just got up and was walking away isn't bothered by it. I didn't buy that part.
Yeah, no, fair. I mean, I guess they're trying to add that little bit of tension where there is none, isn't there? Because I mean, there are some really comical moments, like before they have the big fight, which we've said it was really well choreographed and executed. But like, you could see somebody had a little note on set that day. Oh, we've got two Jet Lis that look exactly the same. How are we going to differentiate? I know this one can pull his shirt down a little bit. It needed to get ripped by the other Jet Li, at least. Like, have a little moment as the fight starts, and then one gets it. But it's like, hang on, I must reveal that I am the baddie. So here's a bit of my.
Yeah, anyway. It's like prison rules or something.
Yeah. All intents and purposes, though, this was a success, right? So 49 million budget, 72 million box office.
Wow.
Not bad. And obviously Stath had a dud previously. So for him, he's sort of back on track. In fact,
I think it's definitely an ascension, I think.
As you said a few times, it's a nice step in the right direction for him. Box office is back, turning into profit for him as well after Turn It Up and after Go to Mars. So yeah, it's going to be an important one, I think, in terms of the path that he's on, and to see where he goes from here.
All right. And I mean, soon after he was in war as well, wasn't it? So it's like he is getting this repeat business.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think it's just jumped into my head again. We really are all over the place tonight. That again, I may be wrong, but I think they wanted him for the Hitman movie.
Right. Yeah, that would have been cool.
Like you saying that, and then it was in my head, and then it went, and then that's come back. I think maybe he was on the list, because it ends up being Timothy Oliphant, who I absolutely love in Deadwood and Justified, and
great actor,
but not necessarily right for that role.
I don't think so. And this is the thing, is that I'm kind of stuck on like the voice of Hitman as well. You know, when you have like these voice actors, but maybe it would have been a good one for the Stath, because he wouldn't have had to use his transatlantic accent. He could just be trans-European or something like that.
All right, before I get your final rating for this. I'm going to delve into my letterbox as I do. I've got some interesting ones for this. So this is from James Haves. What do you get when you mix Jet Li, multiverses, Jason Statham doing a terrible American accent, the writer of Final Destination, the director of Final Destination, a shitload of recognizable late 90s, early 2000s metal, kick-ass kung fu fight scenes with bursts of Matrix-style slow motion. A fucking awesome movie. That's what you get. We know where he stands on that. To counterbalance, it's also nice to have a counterbalance, isn't it?
Sure.
A scary ghost does not agree. The one is so terrible, I can't even believe it exists. The more Jet Lis, the better, I always say. And the one features 2 Jet Lis fighting each other with terrible new metal remixes playing in the background. I mean, I'm not sure they're remixes, so I'm going to pick that out.
Yeah.
I'm not even going to comment on the nonsense plot because who cares? Jason Statham should have been blacklisted from Hollywood after this, though. I mean,
harsh.
He's gonna enrage this Stath fan over here. Mike told me that on Ghost of Mars, he liked the fact that I was sticking up for the Stath and he was enraged that they were coming after our boy. Well, I mean, imagine how I feel after this one.
You must be seething, yeah. It's disgusting.
And this is from AJ Black. How can you possibly dislike a movie that has Jet Li frequently kicking ass to the tune of 90s hard rock? Answer: with great difficulty. The one has as many flaws as good points, yet somehow it manages to balance them out and deliver an end result that simply entertains on a very basic switch your brain off firmly level, which I think is essential what we've been saying.
Yeah.
This has Delroy Lindo and Jason Statham as the 2 multiverse cops hunting him. Well, this is before Jason. See, I can't help myself. This is before Statham became the Stath. So he's not quite as awesome, but he's still Statham, even supporting crap American accent. I think that's the perfect place to leave off on other people's view.
Well, I did a bit of planning.
Please.
I like a little bit of planning, and since I've listened to a few, and I've got a couple of reviews here as well.
Oh, go for it. I love it.
Okay. So Matt Lynch, 3.5 stars. He says, deeply silly, deeply satisfying. I want to live in the universe where this got a ton of direct-to-TV sequels. Also, the ending is flat out terrific. So Matt Lynch agrees with us on the kind of potential. Another Matt says, and the Matts love this one. Matt also gives it 3.5 stars. He says, unabashedly silly, but very fun and fast-paced early 2000s Jet Li sci-fi action movie that was my kind of shit when I was 14, and it still is now. A movie so early 2000s that it contains not one but 2 Papa Roach needle drops. A movie has strong supporting cast: Delroy Lindo, Jason Statham, still rocking a little bit of hair, believe it or not. So a nice little bit of a nod there, and lots of fun action scenes. Some other people weren't as interested because I knew you like to go both sides. Joel Dusha gives it 2.5 stars. He says, this was not good, but it had a rat with distractingly huge balls in it. So at least it was memorable. Yo Roboto gives it 2.5 stars and says, a bomb stuffed up the rat's ass detonating in perfect sync with the ooh-ah from Down with the Sickness is perhaps the image of nu metal cinema. The premise of a person traveling through alternate realities, assassinating their other selves, and absorbing their power deserves a better movie. The Jet Li versus Jet Li finale fight is fun, lots of store brand Matrix stuff, but also a few cool moves actually shot well. The ending is perhaps the single greatest movie ending ever. No, I won't hear arguments to the contrary. The concept and finale have been absolutely burned into my brain, bonded to my DNA for the past 20 years, but I rightly forgot basically everything else about the movie.
Sure.
So even though they give it 2.5 stars, they're still seeing, like the good sides of it.
Absolutely. So. I have to say, your impression of that part, that I don't know what to call it, but that vocal cue is really impressive. It's really on the money.
Thank you very much. So yeah, I feel like I can relate to some of the stuff that you've said in there, and even the people who rated it poorly still kind of had a bit of love for it. I hadn't seen it in about 20 years, and I was worried how's this gonna stand up? And after watching it again, I don't feel like it was a lot worse than I remember. I don't feel like it was any better than I remember. And maybe at 1 hour and a quarter, it's really hard to really mess that up. I don't know. What did you think going back?
Yeah, I think I liked it more than I thought I was going to. And then, I'll just repeat myself from earlier in the episode. I think I've liked it more the more we've spoken about. I think we've highlighted some of the really strong points of it. And actually, the stuff that we've picked out, they're all forgivable sins.
Yeah.
It's a fun, fast fighting flick. That's it, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, thanks for bringing me on to have a look at it and have another trip down. Like you say, with all these reviews, it's the same with the VHS, and that it's like just talking about it as well can sometimes elevate it some more.
Absolutely, yeah. So in terms of the Stath then, are you going to go for classic, worth catching, or completist only? Where do you think it sits amongst his 41 strong so far? It'll be interesting to see how many classics we get, how many we get within each category. Where do you think this one falls?
Yeah, so in the last episode, with Ghost of Mars, you guys did it with, I think Max.
Yeah,
chose it within the realm of what he had already done as well. I think that, but regardless of if it were what he has done now and what he's got over the whole filmography, I would go classic, because it's on the cusp of he's ascending to the Stath, right? And after the last two kind of forays into Hollywood, I don't know. I wonder what he was feeling like at the stage. Like, was he like, "Oh, this one really has to kind of step up"? And I think it did. And so, yeah, I would go classic.
This has got to be the film that got him the Transporter, right?
Yeah.
And then the Transporter is the film that got him everything from that point onwards, I think, is what I'm going to feel like I'm going to need to argue when I get to that movie.
Yeah, it was. I think it's probably quite different from where he's come to, but I think it's one to watch, and especially like at like 87 minutes or something. It moves quickly.
All right, and then one final thing in honor of Mike Burton. He has asked that I start to do some Stath stats. So for each film, we've got some categories. He wants to know: does the Stath get a snog? Does he get a shag? Does he get slayed? And does he go to skins? So for those who aren't maybe Southern British, I'm not sure. Does he get his top off? Does he get his, does he get his guns out? Are the guns out for everyone? Yeah. What do you reckon across those four categories? Any of those appear in the one?
No, I don't think they do they?
No, sadly not.
He's very single-minded in his mission in this, and no time for. Well, I mean, by the sounds of it, with Ghost of Mars, it didn't sound like he had time for it either. But he sounds like he made time. But no, none of that in this. I'm not too bothered about that.
No, I'm not sure it's going to be a barometer of quality, but I'm looking at it in front of me right now. There's a lot of zeros and not many ones. So he's only had one snog in Ghost of Mars, and he's died twice in Turn It Up and Ghost of Mars. That's all we've got so far. So all of this is to come from the Statham future films.
Yeah, so you could tell me, like, does he, when he was kind of finding his way, finding his brand, did he kind of foray into any like romantic comedies or dramas or anything like that?
No, he's been very single-minded in what he's going to give you. A couple of villains, In the Name of the King, fantasy flop. Other than that, it's pretty much geezers and fighters.
Yeah, and we're here for it.
Oh yeah, 100% here for it. For the next 2 years, it turns out. In my case.
Yeah, nice one.
All right, mate. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
What I'm really trying to do so far is just trying to get like fresh voices, something different every time. So I'm so pleased when you volunteered to come for this one. I really appreciate it. What else have you done that people can go back and listen to, or what else have you got coming up, or other appearances have you got on any other shows that maybe people can tune in?
Yeah, thanks. So you can hit me up on Twitter at Blake Byles. That's BlakeByles. I'm not massive on there, but I'd love to hear like any feedback and comments and stuff. I've also been on Indie Comic Spotlight with Tony, doing Blankets and Habibi by Craig Thompson, and Habibi featured Ria as well, who you mentioned earlier, and we had great discussions there. I love going on Indie Comic Spotlight. I was also on 20th Century Geek. You mentioned Scott as well. We had a look at a short story again, a horror, which was, I'm glad he got me in. I'm glad I committed without really looking into it, because I'm not really a horror person, but I really, really enjoyed it. Scott was a great guy. So check that out as well, 20th Century Geek. I'm also on YouTube, Blake Byles, again, just search me up there. I've got a few kind of video essays I've done there through my course, which I've just finished. And I hope to kind of be in this comics emotion sphere again for some more chats.
I mean, you're here now, and you can't. Once you're in, you can't escape.
Yeah, it's like all of a sudden I've got a massive list of like books and shows and stuff to watch. It's good, and the community is such a great one as well.
It happens to us all. Like same as you, Tony hit me up and said, like, "Oh, do you want to come and talk Serenity comics?" I was like, "Okay, I've never done anything like this before. I'll give it a go." Here we are, like 18 months later. You just get sucked in and there's no escape. But I have to say, like, I mean, all the stuff I've heard with you and Blake has been great. But I really enjoyed that one with you and Scott on. Remind me what it's called?
Again.
And again, I always think of like Awake or Alive, but I think that's because I'm thinking about potentially the end of that story and giving it away to people. But yeah, I thought it was fascinating, that conversation between you two, because you were bringing so much of your outside knowledge into that story. It was fascinating hearing what you had to say.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. Because the thing with the shorts, that's the beauty of short stories. Like there's a real like economy of space and time. So it really, a good story can take you off into these different tangents, right? And that, again, that's what these podcasts are great for, to kind of unpack stuff. Like a 87-minute thrill ride of multiverse action. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, mate. And thank you everyone else for listening and partaking in this journey with me through the Stath's filmography. I'm Jack's Musings, that's JACS, and you can find me on Twitter, where I am also most active. You can also contact the show directly on Twitter under the name Back to the Film Og. Make sure you use the hashtag #FollowTheFilmography. This show has been presented to you by the Pop Gorillas, a collection of hive minds who provide spoiler-free reviews of anything from pop culture in less time than it takes to listen to a song. I'm also a proud member of the Comics Emotion family, a super place full of the world's greatest people, dedicated to bringing you podcasts on a variety of geeky topics. So please make sure you take the time to search, subscribe, and rate our shows whenever and wherever you listen. Until next time, be excellent to each other and make sure you take the time to treat yourself too. I am Jack signing off. Yippee-ki-yay, movie lovers. Cut.